Hey there, Internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week, this month, for one of our Patreon early access episodes, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing today, Trev?
Doing all right. We are recording this here December 30th, so it'll go live December 31st tomorrow for our patrons, and then end of January for everybody, as we typically do on these bonus episodes. And yeah, we didn't really have a game plan kind of going into this episode. We spitball a couple ideas kind of before we hit record. So we'll kind of just see where the wind takes us. But before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you are hearing this well after the fact and aren't one of our Patreon supporters, if you like what you hear, please, as always, remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you are feeling extra generous and don't already support us there, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite and support us. Get early access to episodes like this one. If you support us at a certain threshold, you'll get kind of like first crack at all of our podcast episodes. Usually go up, if not a day in advance, at least like usually 8 or 9 hours in advance of when they go public to everybody else. Basically, as soon as I get them like uploaded to our podcast feeds, I make them live on Patreon for supporters at our $5 and above level. And I want to give a shout out to, as we do always, our monthly supporters, Pam Bev Larson, Sherry Starkey, Teresa Wilkinson, and myself, Trevor Starkey. Thank you to all of us for being our Patreon producers, keeping the bills paid. I've been a little lax in like looking at our like company account. We still have plenty of money, so that's good. We dipped a little bit this year, but that we're still basically like well within the initial seed money I threw into the account like a year ago. So so all of the Patreon support has really kind of helped more or less cover just the costs of running things. Even at the, like, I'd love to see us grow in the coming years and stuff, but even at the rate we're currently at, we got like probably another 4 years before we would actually have to like dip into anything, unless we keep adding like a million different podcast feeds or something, because those add up. But we're more or less covering our costs. So so shout out to all of our Patreon supporters that are helping us do that. So yeah, let's just kind of dive in. We talked about.
I mean that. So now you made me have like a second spitball topic here as well.
Hit me. Yeah.
Which is just because me and you have, and we're gonna have it in front of the entire audience here. But me and you, I don't know if we've really had a like one-on-one chat of like what do we want in like a That Nerdy 2021 kind of time, right? Because me and you've obviously spent many hours, lots of hours and days and nights in my old apartment in Austin talking about That Nerdy year one kind of thing. But I don't really know if we've had kind of an idea of like what we kind of want for 2021 as well. This also, again, for everyone behind, like listeners from, your van full of nuns and whatnot, every topic and thing we're going to talk about tonight, we literally are just riding by the seat of our pants on.
Yeah.
But I think that could be an interesting conversation as well, just like what we kind of each see out of 2021 for That Nerdy as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, like, so much of it has just kind of been in flux because of how 2020 has played out.
Yeah.
Like, and that was certainly an idea I thought about bringing to the table, was like, let's do it like you and me talking about, 2020 in the year of That Nerdy Site. Yeah. And honestly, like, just since, like I look at stuff like, the fact that review, like, we just kind of dried up on doing reviews outside of the podcasts and stuff. Like, we barely, and we talked a little bit about this on this week's News You Care About. Like, the fact that we barely have written content going up on the site these days is something I wish we were better about, but at the same time, like, I haven't been motivated to sit down and really do a ton of writing, so I'm not going to try and like force anybody else to do a ton of writing. And I still get to kind of, especially as I am the driving force right now between our three main podcasts of That Nerdy Site Show, that I'm one of the hosts of That News You Care About, and then That D Plus Show. I'm basically on all three podcasts we have each week, and it's like some of that is driven I'm the one that got all the OBS stuff set up to like do all of that stuff, so I can keep all the video podcasts and stuff going, and so there's an element of like, well, I can't take a week off because otherwise I don't know what's gonna fall by the cracks there, but also like I'm getting plenty of opportunities to share my thoughts on most of the things I want to sit down and talk about, so I don't need to do an extra little thing of sitting down and doing writing on a game or something like that. So yeah, that's like I would love to see us get back into more written stuff and features and stuff going up on the site. But again, like 2020 was such a weird year.
It's such a weird first full year to have a website and to have a like content creation thing.
Yeah, I'm very happy with and proud of, you know, the smattering of written stuff we did have go up on the site this year. I'm really my review of Final Fantasy VII Remake early in the year, which I think was the last like real formal review we had, is one of my favorite reviews I've ever written, because that game certainly meant a ton to me, and I really enjoyed kind of getting to do a deep dive on it. And I think Jazz for sitting down and kind of helping me steer the ship a little bit on the edits on that one, and then my piece on Spiritfarer was another one that like was a very personal piece that I like. When I was writing that, I put a list in my phone of like all the other things I wanted to, like all the other things I was in that moment motivated to work on. And then just nothing else kind of came of it. So I have the list right here. TNS to do, that nerdy site to do. The two boxes that are checked are that retro gaming show episodes and Spiritfarer feature of how Spiritfarer helped me say goodbye. But then beyond that, I was like, okay, I want to do a Spiritfarer review, a formal review. I want to do a Hades review. I want to do a formal Last of Us Part 2 review, which even that, like, I wrote a couple thousand words on The Last of Us Part 2 back when I had played that game, and then just never actually, like, finalized the review. But then, like, Astro's Playroom, Miles Morales, Bugsnax, Sackboy, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and even doing something for Demon Souls. I wanted to try and like put something there, but I got the Spiritfarer piece done. And I was like, I don't really want it. Like, it might be just that in the work from home setup, because I'm sitting in front of my computer, like
all day,
this computer all day. I don't want to then continue sitting in front of it and do another little thing of writing. Whereas like when I was going downtown to the office and working at that station, coming home at least still felt like something new. So yeah, there's definitely been a funk driven by the pandemic and quarantine and all that stuff, I think. But because I have the different podcast outlets, I've not been like overly concerned about really trying to shift things. I've just kind of reached a point where I'm like, I'd just rather, especially I would rather have a dialogue about a lot of the games we've played this year with somebody else as opposed to just me putting down my thoughts on the thing. So that's why I love getting to do like our spoiler cast episodes like Ghost of Tsushima
I agree.
or when we did Last of Us Part 2 or Final Fantasy Remake. Really kind of bouncing the conversation off those other people. It's something we talked about a little bit on this week's normal episode of That Nerdy Site show where me, Frank, and Cam sat down and talked about Wonder Woman. Like, after a weekend of hot takes flying left and right on that movie, it was refreshing to just sit down and talk with some friends about what we thought about it in something that wasn't trying to be like 280 character bite-size impressions. So like I'm happy with the podcast and I'm happy with the output we're having. I mentioned this to you yesterday as well. Like I want us to get away from overcommitting and overpromising or pre-promising things. Even like the fact that we did that conversational podcast and it was something we'd been talking about for months and we've done 2 episodes and then like did nothing for a month and a half with that. That was specifically why I set it up as like a separate podcast feed, because I was like, I don't know when we're going to have time or what the schedule for this is going to be like. So I don't want to commit to anything. But I know in Cam's mind, I think it was going to be like a every other week kind of thing, but then obviously that didn't happen or hasn't happened. So that's just like the latest example of we've maybe bitten off a little more than we can chew at our current kind of state or mindset.
I think, yeah, there's so much that I agree with there, and I think feel as well. It's interesting in a lot of ways because it's been such a weird year. So it's that thing, like it's hard to grade. It's hard to get a sense of. I think for me, one of the big things is recognizing the fact that, and like I knew this to some degree already. Obviously, like it's a lot of work. Everything is a lot of work, and all of the plates that you would spin simultaneously at once, right? And like I think the balance of, for me at least, right, of doing all the creative things, doing your actual job, and then trying to balance a relationship as well. Like I don't know how you, like, cause I think you were doing like writing every day while you had a relationship, or that might have been, like, I'm trying to figure out where that.
Yeah,
like, I don't know how. Like it's that.
Yeah, I was writing every day in the middle of the relationship, or I started doing the writing every day back while I was seeing Kat at the time.
Yeah.
That admittedly was only like, I want to say I started that in November. We broke up in January. So it wasn't like that long of it, but it was a dedicated, and a lot of times, and she admittedly like didn't appreciate this at times, but it was she would go to bed and then I would stay up a little later and write or play some games and then do some writing or something like that. So that was more or less what it was. And then like eventually she was like, but, or you could spend time with me. And I was like, but I am spending time with you. You're going to bed because you have to wake up early in the morning for work.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't, like, that's not what my schedule is. So
yeah,
ultimately, like, yeah, it was only a couple months of that, but I know that it admittedly did put a strain on our relationship that I didn't realize it was putting on our relationship. I think there was also an element of that she was intimidated, and I'm like, I don't want to like come across like I'm being a dick or whatever, but like there was an element that felt to me like she felt intimidated by the drive that I was putting into it and the fact that I was trying to do this thing every day in order to try and go get a job at an IGN or something like that. And she was at a point where in her kind of professional development, she was stagnating a little bit and she was struggling and having some difficulty. So me making some moves and kind of getting some traction in the gaming side of things as I was doing that, I think also helped kind of put her off a little bit. But yeah, I mean, like that's something I look at in your perspective this year, and the kind of balancing your that nerdy site stuff with playing games with your relationship with Shrav. Like I know that Shrav rightfully is coming first on a lot of those things, and I don't fault that at all. But it is a draw on your time that certainly a year and a half ago when we were talking about a lot of that nerdy site stuff was not, in the equation, was not a factor.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one for me where it's in a very kind of maybe naive way. I'm just like, all these things take so much time. And like really ignoring the 9-to-5 job that takes like the least amount of time and effort to like think about and do, really, right? It is the fact that our chosen kind of preferred storytelling medium is the one that involves the most time being spent doing the thing, and writing about the thing and talking about the thing and producing content on the thing. And it is that thing of, if you're in a relationship and presumably you work the same hours of like a 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever it might be thing, you're going to get home or already be home in my case at the same time, and so they're going to naturally want to spend time there, right? And figuring out that balance, and I think over the year getting better at that balance and getting better at striking the right kind of notes there is something that takes time, right? And very much when Trevor was here for the entire arc of like this starting, like RTX RTX 2019 is when we like first even begin to have like any sort of like seedlings of like what would eventually become that nerdy site. And I think the very next weekend is when I first met Shravya. And then we didn't start like dating until November. And so like that, like Trevor was here for like the entire arc of like this kind of spawned a relationship. And
yeah,
so,
when we were playing our game of the year last year, Borderlands 3.
Absolutely.
I remember you telling me some stories about Shravya, and I think you were flirting with the idea of you guys dating or something at that point.
Yeah, like a lot of time during Borderlands 3 was just us sussing out like what that nerdy to be in our own just like creative frustrations and desires and wants and everything, but also talking about that. And I think one of my own personal goals and journeys this year in particular has been, especially my kind of reference on News I Care About since like June, is kind of trying to strike the right balance and being very mindful of the fact that like of not burning out, of not getting frustrated, of not kind of inducing any sort of like toxicity into both the space that I'm working in, my own life, whatever it might be, and trying to do everything as well as I can, and also acknowledging the fact that I am not a superhuman. I am fallible, and that I am certainly going to make mistakes, and trying to be aware of that as well, right? And like learn from my own mistakes and shortcomings from my time both at IP and since, really. And so I certainly at the very least have taken a very concerted effort, especially since like June and July, to like not try to necessarily overpromise on things, and to be mindful of my own time and what I can put forth, right? The irony for me in a lot of those ways is in the last few months really getting excited about all of the ideas that we have, right? And all the kind of things we have in the works, and games in general. Like I constantly want to do more than we're doing. And that's been true since about 2010 when I first started doing stuff on the internet. As I know it is for you too. But
I mean, I think often about like if I didn't have to work, like I would play games and I would stream games for fun, and I would go back and like visit. I would spend the time that I have working going back and revisiting older games that I just want to go back and look at, and then kind of keep the current like structure of like, oh, and I'll keep doing podcasts and I'll keep playing the new things in my off hours or whatever. But obviously that's not a thing, and so it is trying to figure out, like trying to do that juggling, balancing thing. Even the big kind of as a little tease of something that I am really wanting to do in 2021. We'll see if it actually happens, but the thing I sent you the mock-up for last night, like I would love to do that. It requires a lot of time going back and playing old games, and I don't know how effectively I can juggle that with trying to keep up with the new games that are coming out that I want to play, not only to be a part of the conversation as it's happening, but also just like I enjoy the new games and I enjoy seeing where the medium is going and all that stuff. So like spending time, and even going back to something like Mass Effect or something, when the remastered trilogy comes out, like I really want to do that, but juggling that with everything else. Like this year, I look at January was basically like me going back and playing The Witcher 3, which I had put in a ton of time in 2016, or when it came out, I think 2016, 2015, whenever it came out, put a ton of time into it that year, but never really got out of like the first chunk of the game really. So when the Netflix series came out, I like January is typically a slow period. So I was like, okay, I've got like, there's nothing I'm really super eager to play until Final Fantasy Remake comes out, so let me hop into to Witcher, and I ended up spending like a month doing that. But I didn't have like that luxury of doing that the rest of the year. Pretty much, there was very little like time where I could have slotted in like, let me just go back and play these retro games. Like I mentioned, I would love to just go back and be a dummy in Skyrim or something like that. Because like I have the itch to hop back into a game like that, but I don't have the time to do something like that. So like that's the kind of thing, if I didn't have to work, I would love to spend time diving into those games or and sharing my interest in those games. I'm doing that a little bit with our retro gaming show, but even that is like in, at most maybe a 30-minute chunk, and it's basically like I'm playing a game and I'm moving on to the next game. It'll be especially more interesting when I get to like the SNES Classic side of things, where it is like, okay, I want to put a little more time into an Earthbound Let's Play or something like that, because I have, such a near and dear, that game, Super Mario RPG, like that is where my love of RPGs really kind of started, was that era, and those are significantly longer experiences. So, trying to like juggle that while also trying to keep up with, the modern gaming is like that's the trick of it all, I think, really. And then on top of that, also, watching something every week on Disney Plus for a podcast and stuff like that. Like that ends up being the easiest, because even if I can't like wrangle somebody else to hop into an episode with me, I can throw on a random 30-minute episode of an animated show on there and just do a quick and dirty like solo show of that D Plus show. And that's way easier than, as you kind of alluded to, playing 40 hours of a video game and then recording a podcast on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I mean, again, like another one that like there are so many. I think one of the big things that we've already started to do that I've wanted to do, I know you wanted to do for a long time, is like streaming / let's plays kind of things. And for me, it's something I've wanted to do for a long, long time. And like, there's so many series. I mean, even you just talking there about like just being a dummy in Skyrim made me think of like, I think it'd be super fun if we were just like dummies in like a No Man's Sky kind of a game, and just like we're just dumb in that game together. Or even like, if obviously hindsight being 2020, but like if we had done like Logan and Trevor are idiots in Borderlands 3, our game of the year kind of thing, and like just like go back to that, right? And Logan gets his platinum trophy finally kind of thing. And like there's so many great multiplayer co-op kind of games for us to be stupid in, outside of all of the infinite amount of like single player experiences, or like experiences where one of us is like remote sharing or that kind of thing. And like that is one of the areas where like I feel the most kind of excitement and potential in terms of what we can do, and in terms of avenues for like new growth and new kind of ideas to happen for the site in 2021.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that ends up being the hardest for us to try and schedule together. Like,
well, not even hardest to try to schedule. Just, I mean, it's also just like the work on, especially like the minute we have more than like another person on there. Yeah, like a schedule would be like editing everything together, right? And like editing any sort of like let's play thing that we would kind of do and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if it was a stream, we could do like, if we wanted to try and do like both of our perspectives or something, that would be like a pain in the ass. But if it was like we're doing like one person's perspective, but we're both on cams or something, like that shouldn't be too difficult to set up through Streamlabs or something like that. It comes into the trying to make sure that like there isn't a weird lag or something like that. So like that's, but yeah, it is a a minefield of trying to do that. But really, like honestly, I think, I mean, like even the ideas like you've had of you and Jazz doing stuff, like so much of that I think comes down to just having the time to get you guys together to do that, even if you're able to be in the same room or whatever as roommates. Like making that happen is a scheduling thing more than maybe like we can overcome the tech. It is really trying to figure out, like, I mean, how many times do I hop into the Slack and be like, hey, like, anybody who wants to be on the show this week? And like, I don't get a response for hours. And then I finally like ping people again, and be like, anybody? And then finally like Cameron or somebody will hop on and be like, okay, yeah, I can do it. Let's try and figure out like scheduling. It's just like, we all have our busy lives, and this, I mean, rightfully so, isn't anybody's like number one priority, because obviously we do have other aspects of it. Like, this is the fun thing we get to do on the side. But as a result, we have to prioritize, the things that, make us a living, or the people in our lives that are important to us. And I like fully understand that, and don't like, that's just like the reality of the situation. So really, like, I mean, what I would love to see us do in 2021, going back to kind of that idea, would be like, let us set up a schedule where every Sunday night at 7 p.m. AZ, 8 p.m. Austin or whatever, that's when we're going to sit down and record that Nerdy Site show.
Yeah.
We record it straight to Twitch, and then I can just rip the Twitch archive and upload that as like the podcast for the next morning. Like we get a schedule where this is when we're doing the podcasts every week. Whoever can hop on, hops on. And then with that schedule like steadfast, then we can open up the idea of like, okay, well now we have these blocks of time free where I can hop in and do a Twitch stream or something like that.
Yeah. And we're getting there somewhat in the way of like, I mean, pretty much.
Fortunately, like there's nothing stopping me from like I could have, instead of hitting start recording for this podcast, I could have hit start streaming, and we could have just been streaming this all to Twitch and then had it there and ready to go. So like technologically we're set up to do that. It's just a matter of like I would want us tied to a more defined schedule.
We're getting there somewhat. I mean, at least in terms of like D+ shows, I think is always going to be the one that's going to be the hardest for, just cause in terms of like the guests that come on that show.
Yeah.
But in terms of like news you care about, I mean, like whether it's Monday or Tuesday, I mean, we always pretty much record at 6:15 Austin time, 5:15 AZ, like every day. And so that one like is the most consistent. Not news you care about. That Nerdy show usually records on Sundays. Now it's just being like, hey, like we're gonna like it's just. I mean, some of these things too are, you know, in the most kind of honest way possible, just me and you doing the things, because it is a little bit like we talked about, I think, off air yesterday, where it's like, if me and you do the things are probably just going to get done because we're the two who are kind of, I think, kind of the main creative forces behind stuff. So if me and you are each on the same page on the thing, we can probably make the thing, like, it's us being like, at 7 p.m. AZ, 8 p.m. Austin, every Sunday, we're going to stream an episode of that Nerdy Site show. And, like, whoever is available is on the show kind of thing. But that's when we're going to do the podcast. Then, like, and me and you commit to that in terms of, like, yeah, like, that's good with us. We'll get enough bandwidth, right? Like, one of the things, too, that we talked about, and I can't remember if it was on or off air, is the fact that, like, you know, Jazz messaged today in Slack that she's, like, getting a microphone. Mm-hmm. And so part of the problem has been the fact that, like, we're a 5-person crew that has kind of been a 4-person crew for a little bit because she didn't have that mic. And so it was a thing of, and Frank has just been, like, hammered by work a lot lately. So it's been, kind of been a thing of, like, it's been 3 people who are going to be on the podcast. So, like, if for any reason one of us hasn't been able to be on, we have basically one other option.
Yeah, and that's where, like, sometimes it has been like, okay, well, I don't have anybody as a guest, or like I don't have anybody on internally who stepped up to record a D+ show this week. So I guess, like, last minute, I am gonna just let me go flick through and find something to watch, and that's what this week's episode is gonna be. Like, and fortunately, we've only had to do that, I think, like, maybe once, maybe twice on, like, this show, that Nerdy Site show. And I think that was even as much more, because I want to say it was like I went through all of my personal, like, game of or movie of or whatever of 2019. Like, I did that as a solo episode last year, and it was just because, like, everybody else was slammed with other things and couldn't do it. So, like, that's the only time where it's come down to, like, it's a solo show. And I guess I mean, this was one of the things, like, that anime pod, when Christian was doing that ended up being, like, a solo show far more than I was anticipating it would be. But it also,
I think Christian anticipated too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it also kind of, like, let me realize, or let me be more comfortable with the idea of doing a solo that D+ show, where it was, hey, I can't get Cam together for this episode, or I can't get Frank or Logan or whatever. So, like, yeah, I'm still going to do all of the structure of that D+ show. I'm still going to go through all the segments. I'm still going to do all the extra little research, but it's just going to be me talking my thoughts on the thing as opposed to bouncing it off somebody. I mean, we don't get enough feedback really on any of our shows to know if those work better or worse than anything else. But I haven't seen a huge, like, dip or drop off on those episodes versus something else.
One thing I'll say that I know that both of us are really proud of is, to that point, the fact that, like, we don't miss an episode, really. Like we don't. I mean, like we find a way. Like even for news you care about. Like there have been like. I did a solo episode before where like I was like I'm just gonna fucking read like an old James Bond piece and like share my thoughts on that again because like and then like Beetlejuice we birthed a new James Bond game from that and so it was great and so like that's one of the things that I'm proudest of and I think part of that is like subconscious, at least for me, like it feels subconsciously ingrained from like the podcast Beyond days where they like record like a freaking fireside chat or like Christmas Day episodes kind of things and like. I think for me, it's always been a thing of like, I don't care if the episode is, 15 minutes long. There's going to be an episode every week of, whatever the show might be. And I think that's something that I'm really proud of is after the end of 2020, News You Care About and That Nerdy Site Show and D Plus Show, like we've put out an episode pretty much every week that I can think of.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's actually one of those things that I don't think we were ever like really talked about it at length at the time. I might have mentioned it like on an episode here or there of something, but back when we did have our kind of like our little exodus of Ben and Chloe and Christian kind of all stepping away from the site, like they were also like Christian having that anime pod and Ben and Chloe really like driving that Wannabe Film Class. Those were the ones I was really hands off on. Those were the podcasts I was really hands off on, and in the lead up to their departures, those were I won't say I was getting frustrated with them, but those were the ones that were missing. Like you scheduled or you said you were going to do an episode on this date, and where's the episode? I'm waiting for the episode, and it was life came up, and that's fine. I don't fault that at all. But I wasn't getting told that like. I was having to reach out and be like, hey, do we have an episode? And then somebody would come back to me and be like, sorry, I don't. And I'd be like, okay. Well, I mean, like, having gone through burnout twice, I'm never going to say, like, we have to stick to a schedule. We have to do that. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, it's ideal, but if you need to take time off or we need to, like, not do a show for a week, I have zero problem sending out a tweet or putting something up on the Patreon saying like, hey, sorry, no episode this week. Life came up. It happens. Like I'm not, and even like it kind of going off of like Beyond, like seeing Kind of Funny take the time off these couple weeks in their like holiday break and not have new podcasts going out. Like that seems unheard of to me. Like I'm so used to them, pre-recording stuff to have all those extra episodes to go during, like the fact that they're actually taking a break and taking a hiatus means that they're not being slavish to the we have to get something out every week kind of mantra. So I'm way more comfortable with that. But the fact that Ben and Chloe and Christian weren't as like ingrained in that kind of mentality, having like come to like. All of them were newer to podcasting, certainly, than the rest of us. The fact that they were missing those weeks, or they would commit to like we're going to do something every week, and then just life came up, and I don't fault life coming up, but just be communicative about it, really. So when ultimately those shows kind of just ended as a result, like it was almost a natural like. I saw it coming because both of them or both of those shows had already gotten comfortable with the idea of not happening anymore, either on a bi-weekly schedule as that anime pod was, or a few weeks had come and gone of that Wannabe Film Class where it hadn't happened. So when ultimately they came and were like, hey, we're interested in stepping away, I was like, I'm not surprised by that. It's of course sad to see them go because I thought they were, putting out great content and I loved, the episodes and that they brought a different perspective to the site than I could bring. So I loved that like we had those options out there for people if they were interested, and I love that they got to flex their muscles and talk about things they really wanted to talk about. But like we talked about, a year plus ago when we launched, when I was on your couch there in Austin, we talked then like Chloe is not going to be long for that nerdy site. We just have her. We are on borrowed time with Chloe.
Yeah.
And that was always the case. We knew that was always the case. And I can't be. I am so proud of the work they did with us, and the work they will continue to do, either in the creative space or just them as humans and the great stuff that they're going to do. But yeah, the like watching those podcasts slip from the let's get one out every week. That was definitely it was a reckoning moment for me of coming to terms with, hey, I don't care if we actually miss these shows, because I would rather everybody put their health first and foremost. But outside of those, I think we missed one That Nerdy Site show this year, and that was it was the lost episode from PAX East. The 4-hour epic.
Such a good episode.
Where we just kind of talked through every single game we played at PAX East. We lost that because Cam's computer exploded the file into like 10,000 different files, and there was no way to recover it and edit it back together. So we missed that episode, and then like the following week was basically like, let's try and recall like the best we can what we played, what we talked about. But yeah, I think that's the only one we really missed. One of the things it's a thing I regret to a degree, but also like it was a casualty of the 2020-ness of everything, is that we've only done 2 seasons of that video game list show, that Ultimate Video Game List show, because I love that. That was, as we've talked about, like that was the thing before That Nerdy Site was an idea. That was the idea I had. I wanted to do that as like a new podcast, and then it just kind of like blew up from there. And that is some of the most fun I have on those is getting everybody together and talking about games and what games are the best and all that stuff. And just as we all started, like we were in the middle of season 2 when basically everything started getting locked down. And so we wrapped up with that. And then I felt like I would, and like we had a couple people that like would regularly reach out with an interest in being on a season 3. Cam Hawkins in particular will undoubtedly be a part of the show when it comes back, I hope. But it was very much, I couldn't help feeling like I would be imposing on people to get them to commit to 10 weeks with me to do this other thing for a site that is not their main focus or anything like that. Amidst everything else going on, as people were losing jobs, people were out of work, people struggling kind of left and right around us, the last thing I wanted to do was be like, okay, well, I need you like for 2 hours a week, and we need to try and coordinate your schedule with 3 other people's schedules and my schedule and make that happen. So like I remain committed that I want that show to come back in 2022 or 2021. God, I'm already skipping ahead a year. It's just a matter of getting comfortable with the idea of trying to bring those people together. And at this point, like, I know I have the bandwidth to do it. Because I know, I know the timetable, especially since we spread out and we moved, like, that D Plus show used to be on Tuesdays. Now that it's on Fridays, we have like a podcast Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I have the weekends to like sit down and really record that other thing. It's just a matter of getting everybody else on board and getting the right people to commit to it. I also, now that we're doing video stuff, I wanted to, before we did a season 3, I wanted to be more comfortable with the video stuff as well, because I want to have like, images of the games coming up or the list kind of as it's being built there on the side of the screen for a video version of the podcast. And just I wasn't comfortable enough with that at the time, but us doing like a watch along of the Game Awards has me feeling better about my capabilities of doing something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, like we said at the beginning, 2020 is a weird year, and, I am unquestionably a dreamer and someone with big ideas and big goals for the site. Trevor, despite his former reputation as a snarky curmudgeon, is secretly he's a massive dreamer and optimist and hopeful guy too. And so, it's been a weird year in that way, but I think that for me, 2020 I've been really impressed and really inspired by all of the work that's been put into That Nerdy Side, right? Like, it is a collective of people who are trying to build something, and I find that really exciting, right? And I find the work of others in the industry that are our peers or friends, or just people that we look up to, or in some cases all three of those, that are doing awesome work and that are doing really important work and that are getting spotlight and shine onto them, that much more motivating and exciting and inspiring, right? And like, I do expect 2021 to be a bigger year for That Nerdy Side, right? Like, we've got some sort of foundation set, right, that we can kind of build off from there, right? Like, whether it is expanding more into videos, hi, you can see this podcast, whether it is going and doing like Twitch streams more, Let's Plays more. Again, check out YouTube. It's very good. Trevor's got lots of Let's Plays there. I've got some as well, or I will have some as well, hopefully in the coming days. And so, these are things that I find exciting and motivating, right? And like, for writing, this is something that I think for both of us, and I know Jazz as well, like, we would like more writing and more written content on the site. And it's something that I look forward to really kind of trying to do in 2021, is to try to, write more on the site. And whether that starts off small with, a goal of just having like a written piece on the site a month. That's like a small thing that can build over time, right? Like, I think one of the big things for me over all the years doing whatever the hell this is, and in particular, again, the last like year and a half since I left IP, last 6 months, whatever you want to call it, is setting smaller goals, but goals that are taking you a few steps further at a time. So that way the next goal is a little bit closer, instead of having giant, massive goals, right? And like Trevor referenced his burnout, I also obviously burnt out, and learning from that and understanding kind of what led me there and the mistakes I made, and the mistakes I made to others in that process, I think is something that I very much have tried to kind of grow from and learn from. And so I think setting simple goals, but goals that are making a difference, right? Like, I think our podcasts are better served by having video versions of them. And it's a small thing to just have this, recording on Discord and then put that up on YouTube. But it is, I think, a thing that makes the product a little bit better, right? And I think for me, right, a small goal, like a small New Year's goal is where, this will go live the day before New Year's, is like, yeah, like trying to have like a piece of written content go live on the site. And like, that's by no means a gargantuan task, but like, it is something that I've wanted to do for really the entirety of That Nerdy Site, is to have more written content. And I think as a collective, we've all been not at the best in that, right? And so that's something that can start me out to, I have one thing go live in January, February, March, and then maybe from there I go to the audacious goal of trying to get 2 things up on the site a month, right? Like maybe bi-weekly kind of thing, and so, or bi-monthly. And so, these are small steps that can over time build up, right? And the immortal words from, the West Wing podcast, which we used to do, you go 2 steps forward and 1 steps back at a time. And eventually you're making some progress. Those 1 steps forward add up. And so, yeah, like, I think that's something that I'm really mindful of and really trying to keep aware of, as well as I have a lot of really fun, exciting ideas. I think, if we can achieve and do a third to half of them in 2021, I will call that an absolute success, and there will be absolute growth for the site from those. And so, this podcast has kind of been one, maybe a little bit of like the things that we didn't do or that we kind of are reflecting back on. And I come to the end of the year and look forward to 2021, and I'm inherently optimistic and excited still about what we kind of have going forward for 2021. like I tell Trevor every single time we ever talk in any forum, anytime I just get to sit down with Trevor Starkey and just have any sort of conversation or interaction, is always an absolute joy, and a gift. And so, there will be more of those. There'll be more of me and Trevor doing dumb things on the internet, because he can't shake me now. He's stuck with me. I know where he lives.
Don't I know it? Yeah.
And so that, and doing things with Cam and Frank and Jazz, and I think
we had
it's a new year.
Cam had a whole show that he wanted to try and do, and then the shakeups over the summer, alongside like Cam with like bouts of unemployment and stuff like that, weighed on him. And so like I haven't checked in with him recently to see if like that's still an idea he wants to try and like bring back, of us doing something with that. But
it's a cool idea.
Yeah, it's and that's the like the problem is we are limited by external forces. Like, we're not at all limited by our ambitions and our hopes and goals. We are limited by our time and our ability to get everybody together at the same time, because we all have different, we're all running different lives. We're all like, this isn't any of our 9 to 5 where I could just be like, okay, from 1 to 2 o'clock, I'm scheduling Logan,
block out,
and that's when Logan and I are going to sit down and do this thing. Like, we just don't have that luxury that like a Kind of Funny has, or something like that. So, as much as I would, love us to be there, and at the same time, like, that's like, at the same time, I don't want to excuse us, because like I look around at places like Uppercut, or I look at our friends who were kind of NYC and they're now 6-1 indie, and I mean, Uppercut has been crushing the game and doing a ton of stuff, and like I look at what they're doing, I look at what 6-1 indie is doing, and I applaud their ability to be way better about like coordinating and scheduling and getting all that stuff together than we are. Like, they're just better at that stuff than we are, and I can't. I can't excuse that. That's something I need to be better about. It's one of the other things I wanted to touch on before we kind of wrapped up or anything was, obviously there was a lot of conversation this year around bringing on more diverse voices in the industry and stuff, and especially when we lost. Not that like that nerdy site has ever been about like quotas or anything, but with Christian leaving, we lost Hispanic representation on the site. With Chloe leaving, we lost female representation on the site, and I very much at that point in time was like, I would love if we are to bring on people onto that nerdy site. Like, I would love it to not be another white guy, because I think more diverse voices, helps the industry. And we already have you, me, Cam, and Frank, that can kind of fill that niche, at this point. And at the same time, it goes back to, I don't want to feel like I'm imposing. And I know that if I were to reach out to Mario Rivera or Cam Hawkins or our friend, our people of color friends, or our female friends out there that aren't just, again, white guys, more often than not, they're going to be excited, they're going to be game, and they would absolutely be interested in doing it. That's where I feel like one of my biggest failings this year is that I just haven't been motivated to reach out to those people and really get them up. Like, the best run I had of it was when I was bringing on people for Hamilton and just talked Hamilton for 8 weeks on the show. And we had people like Cam on, we had people like Joseph Moran, and it was like, I loved that, but at the same time, like, I didn't stop doing Hamilton because I was ready to stop talking about Hamilton, or I ran out of people I wanted to talk about Hamilton with. We stopped doing Hamilton because I couldn't bring myself to reach out to another new person, or to try and like schedule. Because like, I had reached out to people, and either I wasn't hearing back because, again, everybody else also has busy lives. So it just ended up being like, well, I didn't get scheduled the person I wanted to sit down and schedule this with. So I guess we're just going to move away, and I'm going to move on to something else at this point. Like, I hate that is like one of my big failings is, like, I see those voices that I want to reach out and get on the show, and I mean, like, even like, I'm not even bringing other, white guys on the show. So it's not like it's not a diversity thing. It's just I've fallen into a comfort zone of, if you guys aren't available, I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm not really reaching out to guests anymore. Like, I stopped including on the That D Plus show. I stopped putting in the plug for, like, if you want to come on and talk about something, here's the link. In part because I had already failed at getting half the people who had actually reached out and wanted to be on that show. I failed at, like, communicating and working with them to get them on the show. Like, we got a handful of guests that came on that show, but it just, again, the struggles of coordinating just internally, like, becomes that much more magnified when it's trying to, bring on somebody outside of that nerdy site that doesn't have a vested interest in that nerdy site. So, like, that's another area that I wish I was better at, and I would like to say I'm going to be better at in 2021, but also, like, there's an element of, like, I know my own aversions to feeling like I'm imposing or trying to, like, feeling like I'm imposing by asking somebody to be on my podcast. Like, that is still a thing. That is, I guess, the closest I get to imposter syndrome. Like, I'm very fortunate in that, like, I never get bothered by the sound of my own voice or something if I'm listening back on a podcast. Like, I outgrew that phase, years ago at this point, thanks to being an actor and just having that beaten into my head. But I still feel like I'm just like, I don't want to be wasting other people's time. And I feel like, everybody else in this space that is doing their podcasts just like ours, like, I understand how precious that time is, and I don't want to. I still will feel like I'm, imposing if I'm saying, hey, can you take 2 hours out of your day to come and, 2 hours out of your day to go watch a movie on Disney Plus and then come and talk to me about it, for another hour and a half or something like that. I feel like that is a time commitment that I'm asking somebody for, as opposed to, like, if That Nerdy Site show was opened up to, non That Nerdy Site people, and it was just like, hey, yeah, let's bring on Cam and he can talk about what games he's playing with us. But that's also not the idea behind that show. The idea behind that show is, like, let's keep that one internally. That conversational podcast can be one of those, those other shows where we bring people on. But yeah, so those are the struggles I have with how our podcasts are, and maybe that's just something we kind of need to kind of tear down the walls on and say, hey, That Nerdy Site doesn't have to be the team members at That Nerdy Site getting together to talk about our lives and all the nerdy things we love about them. That whole rigmarole from the top of the show. Like, maybe we just tear that down and say, let's, in 2021, That Nerdy Site show is something new.
Yeah. And I think that will be an ongoing conversation. The last thing I will say simply is that I think that throughout 2020 and 2019, and it's one of the reasons I'm so confident of 2021 and beyond being so strong, is the fact that Trev is such a good, I think, steadying force at this site, right? And it's so fun. It's so funny to hear Trevor talk, and not recognize his own unique skills and, like, abilities. But isn't that all of us? Where it's that thing for me of, like, I mean, like, you have a voice and you are a presence within this industry, right? Like, and I think there's so many people who, if you reached out to, would be excited to do the thing. And, like, obviously I also understand, as I would love to have more guests on News You Care About, that, like, it's just, find the time and do all that kind of stuff, and it can be, demoralizing to not get people to kind of reach out to you. But on that point, in so many issues, right, like, Trevor's ability to just make things work and find solutions to problems and steady the ship, especially kind of during everything that has been the crazy of 2020 and pretty much everything that entails, I constantly am kind of blown away by. And, like, admittedly, I am biased. I like Trevor Starkey a lot. He's a neat guy. But there are about, 100 people on the internet, probably significantly more than that, who would all agree And I think that is what makes me excited too, is just the people we have at the site are all really talented, really qualified, I think, really passionate, just decent people. And that's led by kind of the person wearing the captain's hat at the top. And so it's kind of through your stewardship that you've helped us get through a lot of things. I think you've helped, certainly you've helped teach me a lot of things over the many years I've known you, and helped me grow and be a better both creator, writer, voice, and also just like human being. And so that's the exciting thing too, is just looking forward into 2021. And again, like I said before, just doing a whole bunch of dumb stuff, and knowing that we kind of have you in the corner as well. I'm excited for 2021 in that nerdy site. We're going to do awesome, great things. We are going to change some things. We're going to do some new things. And I'm excited to see what those are and what they kind of have in store for those. This is not the podcast we thought we were going to do today, but we went in and ended up doing it like this anyway. But that's what I got to say. Be excited. Everyone send nice things to each other on the internet. It's great.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up there. So thank you, Logan, for sitting down, talking with me about this. Yeah, we came into this really like, what are we going to talk about? We had like, our couple ideas were like, let's talk about the games we've been playing, since we haven't really had one of those normal episodes of That Nerdy Site Show recently. But nope, that's not where this ended
Trevor
up
said
going.
one thing, and I was like, I got another idea instead, though.
Yeah. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this episode. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give a shout out to in this, again, always weird ethereal time gap, because anything that you're shouting out right now is relevant to the 2 or 3 people that might listen to this on Patreon, like in the Patreon early access window.
I will say that I will give a shout out to 2 separate things to help prevent this. First thing is, I will give a shout out to Trevor's episode of The Legend of Zelda on that Retro Gaming show, because you can just watch it. That's why.
It's timeless.
Yeah, it's timeless. Anybody's reactions that I know agree with me to a large extent about The Legend of Zelda, I'm always here to have those. So I give a shout out to that. And the second thing I'll give a shout out to you, if you're listening to this on January 31st, is check out all of the Game of the Year content that we presumably have out at this point in time. It's very nice.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, hear my thoughts on fill in the blank game. Hear what Trevor's Game of the Year is over here, and Cameron and Frank's, and I'm sure there'll be lots of podcasts that we'll do about that, and there will be written content. And so, that's an easy one piece of written content right there for me. There was the easy.
I mean, you say that, but you didn't end up doing a top 10 of 2019. So I don't know. Not. Like we'll see what your Game of the Year 2020 looks like.
Maybe even 2 with the top 10 games of the generation list. So we're getting right up to the start here. So yeah, go check out all of that content that is out there, presumably as well. And just hit us up on Twitter and say what you would like to see us do in 2021. That's also exciting. Maybe I'll just reach out to you personally. You have no choice in the matter. Trevor, where can they find you?
Yeah, you follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter, and I would echo, or that was going to be my plug anyway, would be like, if you're listening to this before it goes out or after the content's already out there, keep an eye on the site for whatever our our Game of the Year stuff looks like this year. Mm-hmm. It is gonna probably be very different. It's something that, again, just in the also in the hierarchy of 2020, like we just regular meetings among our site kind of just fell by the wayside again because of everybody's schedules and stuff.
I would love to. Yeah, we're gonna.
So like we really haven't talked about like what our Game of the Year stuff is. So really at this point, I'm just kind of like, I hope everybody comes together with like a top games of the year list. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we're gonna do a That Nerdy Site Game Awards thing like we did last year. Like when this year started, I had so many ideas. I had like, we'll do our own thing, and then we'll reach out and collaborate with a whole bunch of the other small sites, and do kind of a smaller site Game Awards kind of panel of jurors, that obviously just didn't end up going anywhere, because 2020 was a hellscape. But yeah, so like I don't know what shape our Game of the Year stuff's going to look like. I don't know if we're going to have, additional movie and TVs of the year and stuff like that. I want to try and still do that, at least for myself, but again, I don't know how motivated I'm actually going to be to sit down and write that stuff out. Like,
for sure, movies, I would be down to have a conversation around that.
Yeah, I mean, but like even that, like we had very little in the way of movies that came out this year. So, like I can't just go through and look at my my Alamo Drafthouse like movies I've seen kind of thing, because that all dried up in March. So and so I have to remember, like, oh, that's right, I really love Palm Springs on Hulu, and I really love, like, obviously, like Soul and Wonder Woman being there right now in the mind share, but there was just, movies were a complete shakeup this year. TV shows were a complete shakeup this year, in terms of how, like, so much of the year is a blur. I like, even coming up with like all of the games I played this year and going through that list, I was like, wow, I can't believe that was this year because of how long ago it feels. So yeah, we'll see whatever form that all takes. Check it out over on That Nerdy Site. We have a handy dandy year-end lists section on the website that all of the stuff will be tagged in there. So if you miss it when it's going out, you can always click that and check it out, or go check out all of our 2019 stuff that's out there right now. So yeah, go check out all that stuff. It'll be interesting to see what it ends up looking like a month from now when we're looking back on this and when this episode goes live for everybody. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site and check out thatnerdysite.com for all the latest content from us, be it the myriad of podcasts we do, the Let's Plays that we put up. I at least post little articles for each of the Let's Plays there as well. That is honestly when I look at like 2020 in terms of like some of my proudest aspects are that, at least starting in year 2 on November 1st, we've had something Monday through Friday go up on the site every day. Because there was a great, I loved early on in the year when with Wannabe Film Class and with Anime Pod, we were doing like every other week we had 5 days, 5 podcasts. Like, it's a lot, and I don't expect anybody to be listening to all of them. But like, if we had something that fit for you, hopefully you had a thing. And it was just cool that we had, like, for a little brief run there, we had a different podcast going out every day. So I like that since November 1, we've had something going out every day on the site, and hopefully we'll continue to do that for the foreseeable future. And then I also. I'm proud that I finally, after years of doing videos, have started getting somewhat decent at Photoshop to make thumbnails and stuff. Like when I figured out how to, and it's a very stupid, simple thing, and it took me all of 5 minutes to do once I finally like looked up the how do you do this in Photoshop? But just adding an outline around like text, so that like, oh, you've got the black text with a white outline, like. I was really proud when I figured out how to do that day. That was a cool day for me. So yeah, I've loved kind of getting to develop those skills a little bit. I loved the while they're basic, absolutely. I like the overlays we got here. I like that they have our our glasses as kind of the framework for us. So it feels uniquely us, as opposed to the myriad of podcasts that are like, okay, it's somebody in a box. At least our box is a little bit more branded to us. So I love that, like, that is where I've gotten to like grow this year a little bit, is just kind of like finally sitting down, taking the time to learn Photoshop a little bit, learn OBS a little bit, and Streamlabs, and still want to hopefully get better at Premiere at some point, and not just be like
don't we all
cutting and cropping and stuff like that. But that those can be my 2021 goals. But if you liked what you heard, as I said at the top of the show, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you aren't already supporting us over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, you can always go over there, throw a couple bucks our way. We would definitely appreciate it. We love you. We love everybody that does already support us, even if it is, at this point, mostly our family and friends. We're incredibly supportive. Or thankful for the support that help kind of cover the costs of the site. So I'm not just dipping into savings to pay for all the podcast feeds and the website and all that stuff. Because I've been there, and it's not that I can't do that, but I like not having to do that. And the dream would be that I could pay the team someday, even some kind of bare bones stipend would be great. But every patron, if you aren't already a patron, gets early access to episodes just like this one, where you get these a month before they go live to the rest of the world. Thank you, Logan, for sitting down and talking with me this. I know you got another Zoom call you got to head off to here in a little bit.
You're
but
totally fine.
Thank you, audience, for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.